The velvet jacket we need to hang up in the corner. So
Yeah.
that'll be something. Hey, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams. I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're local, come hang out with us one Sunday morning. Our service starts at 10:30. We actually had a whole group of fans come and visit us. What was it, 2 weeks ago, give or take? Mm-hmm. Got a whole bunch of T-shirts. I got a text like, hey, can we get some T-shirts? I was like, come to church, and they're all yours. And so they did, which was great. In fact, Creighton, we have a picture of one of the young men out and about in the real world.
It was on May 4th.
This was May 4th? Is that so the program that's live, right?
Yes, they can see that right now.
It's a stormtrooper hat with an Outlaw Radio shirt, which...
Not to be it's a clone trooper hat.
It's a clone trooper hat. Well, thank you.
Yeah, bud.
Nerd.
Anyway, I'm joined also by the man that needs no introduction, the maestro of this dysfunction, Mr. Creighton Vaughn.
Hi, I have a Star Wars tattoo. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yeah, so you knew exactly what that was.
Wait, of course I did.
You have a tattoo?
I have a few.
Yeah, these are tattoos, by the way. These are
what's the Bible say about tattoos?
Self-inflicted tattoos.
We need to go over that.
You know what, my son...
Self-inflicted is a weird word.
You know, Quincy actually asked me the other day about tattoos. So hold that thought, because we're talking to the man that also needs to be introduced, Spice Daddy.
Howdy.
A.K.A. Spice.
Yep. Just want to remind everybody what we're talking about.
This is what you do.
I do.
This is what you do. It was nice to see the Braves win last night. Get out of a little bit of a skid. You know, people have been freaking out about the Atlanta Braves. You know, yeah, we haven't been hitting, but we're 20-12 now, 21-12.
I mean,
it's
21-12.
People are, come on, man. It's a 162 game season. I want us to slump now so that we're hot in October.
Don't need any choking like we normally do.
Let the bats go cold in April and May, so that they're hot in October. That's my feeling. Anyway, also joined in studio by football mom, Isaac.
Hello. Happy to be here. Glad to be wearing another thrift store special here.
That one is, at least, you're not promoting another church. I appreciate that.
I thought about wearing that one, but it was kind of dirty. But you wouldn't be able to tell anyway.
And somehow you and Justin coordinated coloring.
We did.
Yeah, we were talking to each other.
Your text thread?
We're soul sisters.
We don't text, we call each other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Average talk time about 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah, and I just also want to remind people what we're talking about, and that is that Justin and I call each other frequently.
Do you fall asleep just with the line open?
That's the only way that I fall asleep.
Because his wife makes him get off the phone with me.
You're free. I mean, you're a free man.
I'm free man. His wife I can hear her talking, like, stop talking to Justin, and
she gets she definitely gets jealous.
Yeah. So Isaac, goes to turn the phone off, but doesn't, and just kind of lets it.
No, you hang up first.
Yeah. No, you hang up first. No, I'll hang up first.
Say goodnight.
So, right as we were about to start the show, the paintball got brought up, and it reminded me. You ever have those moments where you've completely forgot about something, and then something triggers the memory, and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't, that's so funny. It's funny that happened. It's also funny that I had completely, memory hold that one, and it was brought up. So Creighton, you had gone, I was youth pastor for a decade. You had gone to Headwaters Lodge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which was this cool facility up in Virginia, out in the middle of nowhere, no cell signal.
I was the only black person for miles and miles.
Except
me and Marvin.
You and Marvin. There were two of you.
Been there before.
You were, let's be honest though, you were the only Italian for miles. You know what I mean?
was.
So I don't know if this will jog your memory. So, they had this outdoor field, and so there would be, you're creating a whole youth camp, a week-long youth camp. You've got the Bible studies, the nights of worship, small groups, morning devotions. You craft the whole thing, but then there's, you got to fill time, and you're out again in the middle of nowhere. And this facility had a very cool ropes course. I think I pushed you off of a tree.
Yeah, I was doing the zip line. I refused to jump off.
The zip line. Creighton did not want. He's scared of heights.
Terrified. Did
not want to go. You want to tell the story?
I don't.
Is that what started this fear of heights?
No.
Okay.
No, Creighton. It took everything to get Creighton up on this tree, and I was up there locked in, encouraging the kids. You can do this. And Creighton, it took us 15 minutes to just get him up the tree. It's it's 2.5 feet off the ground, but it's Creighton, you can jump up here. No,
We
it was
were much
actually,
higher than that.
It was
We
much
were
higher.
very
It was a
high.
zip line that went through the woods, and like kind of across a ravine. It was very cool. But we're up there. And Creighton finally gets there, and like he feels like he's accomplished something. So they get him all locked in. He's like, "There's no way I'm going down," and I'm like, "Hey, I've been up here a while. What kind of a beetle is this?" Knowing that Creighton loves insects. The moment Creighton turned to see the beetle, I just pushed him straight off the ledge. And he was gone, screaming his head off.
Yep.
I wish I could see that. I'm seeing it in my mind, but it's not good enough.
It would be a good thing to try to replicate it.
Yes.
Anyway, so you have to fill a lot of time on a camp. Yeah, you have to fill a lot of time on a camp. And so, we'd have these outdoor activities. So we were kind of having a brainstorming session of something that would be fun. And we thought it would be the kids would love if we did a human duck hunt. And so you remember the old Nintendo game Duck Hunt, where
Yes.
you've got the gun and the ducks are going across, and you're shooting at the ducks. So we thought it would be funny to set cones, and like the 7 or 8 male counselors would walk from one end to the other, and we would let the kids try to shoot them with paintballs. I have no idea why we thought this was a good idea. We thought that there's no way they're going to hit anybody. This is just going to be funny.
That sounds like a great idea to me.
But here's the problem.
I would like to replicate
So
this.
we had like promoted this, like leading up to that week. We had like, hey, this is one of the things we're going to do. This will be fun. You should spend $350 to come up here and shoot somebody with a paintball gun. And I knew we were in trouble when we got on the bus to leave. And like half the kids have like paintball magazines and like are all geared up and geeked out. And it's like, oh no. And like we had to roll the guns on the lowest level. So I mean, I think it was worse because the paintball hit you and didn't explode. It just stung. But it was a terrible idea. We did like 4 or 5 rounds. It was like, nope, we're done. We're out of here. Do you remember that?
I do not remember that at all.
You don't remember that at all. It might have been one of the trips you didn't go on.
We need to recreate it so Creighton can experience.
No, we're not gonna. That's one we will not recreate.
I'm also not going to go on a zip line again.
So we have an
I am
audience.
30 years old.
We have an
I'm
audience
not going
member.
on a zip line.
We have an
I'm
audience
not
member,
getting
John.
paintball
I think
shots.
John needs to explain this on the mic
No,
because
no,
that
that's
was one of
muted.
the greatest ideas.
No,
I've
I'll
ever
share
heard.
it. It's easy. We'll put Creighton on a zip line and we'll shoot him as he goes by on the zip line.
But he has to be dressed like a duck.
Like a duck.
That's true.
Absolutely not.
I think that this is something that we can.
If you would like to see this, email popecreighton@gmail.com.
That's right. Or you can also send your text messages to 678-438-9202.
678-438-9202
202.
along with
No.
your foot pictures.
No, we don't need any of that. We don't need that. So I want to
Check your phone for foot pictures.
No, I'm not going to check my phone. No, I'm going to check my phone for something I copied. I want to just I want to ask the Outlaw Radio audience to pray for a brother.
That's beautiful.
Solid.
We're getting foot.
Listen, Zach,
John's
those were
showing us the
that
foot
was the
pictures
foot
that he sent
pictures
you.
I got.
Yeah, Zach described my foot, particularly my big toe, as ganky. So listen, don't be
You
ashamed.
can put him on the screen, by the way. When
Do
you
not
I
be-
was distracted.
Don't be ashamed to send your foot pictures. Is all I'm saying. He's already broken the ice, called my toe ganky. I'm not ashamed of it. Okay,
Your
it
toe-
is what it is.
Your toe is absolutely gay.
It's a little rough for sure. I
It's-
know. I'm kind of embarrassed to wear flip flops, but
But
it is
not
what it is.
embarrassed enough to send me a picture.
No, or for you to put it on the
I
internet.
kind of encouraged it a little
Yeah,
bit.
I'm sure you did, Spice.
I think it's ready for round 2.
Yeah.
Really.
So, early into Outlaw Radio, when we were, so like the full story arc is we started with an opportunity to be on locally, and they were going to give us 2 minutes for free. And so we hired his productions, Josh Brown and his team, and we did 50 like 2-minute devotionals. And then very quickly, we ended up sending our Bible study audio, and they started making that into a program. And then people wanted a talk show, which is kind of how Outlaw Radio began. And one of the guys that owned, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest HDFM stations in Kansas City. They reached out, and it's Calvary Chapel, Kansas City. The pastor's Jimmy Stewart. Yes, his name is Jimmy Stewart, Jim Stewart. And but they wanted to put me on the radio, And so I had actually been invited out to go speak at their men's conference. I've been out there a few times. I've even spoken at their church on a Sunday morning. Just Jimmy is a great guy. His son Mitch ran the radio station. They ended up selling it for a lot of money. Was able to pay the building a bunch of stuff with the church. They had like the local. What's the Kansas City soccer team? The MLS team. Monarchs, maybe? I'm pulling that out of someplace.
Kansas City Vikings.
I don't think they're the Kansas City Vikings. Anyway, they had like the MLS team on there. Anyway,
Sporting Kansas City.
Sporting Kansas City. Anyway, so I saw this on Facebook. I reached out to Jim. He has been dealing with cancer. He's had a cancer issue. Man, there's a lot of people dealing with cancer right now. But he said he just kind of gave an update. He says, "Greeting friends and prayer partners. The last few months of my cancer journey has been rough, but I wanted to send a quick update so you would be able to pray more specifically. I was in the hospital with a blood clot that ran from my hip to my ankle. They surgically removed the clot from my hip to my knee successfully. The rest of the clot will hopefully be resolved by the daily blood thinner injections I give myself. While in the hospital, they did a CAT scan and found sadly that my cancer has metastasized into my lungs. The doctor agreed that the first 3 rounds of chemo had not gone the way they had hoped, so I'm on a new treatment, of which I've had 1 round. I also developed another UTI, some more antibiotics. I'm at a low point with all these things happening at once. So we're trusting God and His will for whatever the future holds. Would you join our family in prayer as we ask the Lord of hosts to show Himself strong and helping me daily and into the coming weeks and months? God is still good. I'm so thankful for His presence during a season like this. Love and blessings on each of you and your families. Pastor Jim and Lo, his wife. And you could not, Creighton, you've met him.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, you came. In fact, in my recovery, Jim was the first one that was like, if you feel like you're able, I want you to come out. So that was the first place I traveled. Flew. I took Creighton and Nick because I needed help with
Everything.
with everything. Not everything.
No.
Not everything in context, but just like some basic stuff, just picking things up and whatnot. And that was a wild, 48 hours.
That was. I found out that you snored crazy.
I did then, and that was because I'm still was breathing on a ventilator, is what it sounded like. So I just want to ask the Outlaw Radio audience to just over the next week, as you think about it, if Jimmy Stewart, if you watch It's a Wonderful Life, just throw up a prayer for Pastor Jim and his family. I did. So Mitch, we had dinner with him. Mm-hmm. It's his son. Mitch, I was texting Jimmy today, and Mitch is taking over full-time pastoral responsibilities.
Wow.
So Jim's going to try to preach when he's physically able to, but his son is stepping in and never done this before. And so he's going to fill in for his dad and take kind of he's going to shoulder the load at the church. And so just also pray for Mitch. And I know that's kind of a heavier note, but just love that guy. Love that man. He's a good dude. One of the good ones. And just sounds like he's in the middle of the soup, so to speak. So something to think about. Programming note, just so the audience is aware, we will continue episodes up through May 29th, which is the last Wednesday of May. Happens to be my 41st birthday. So we'll have episodes through May, but we will be taking June and July off. And so I'm doing a bunch of traveling with my family, in addition to just normal church responsibilities. Creighton and Justin, they're heading to Honduras to check on some of our missionary friends and try to support them. So we're just knowing it's travel months, people are out of town. We're going to kind of really gear back June. We might come back middle of July. We'll just kind of play that by ear, see how things roll. But just summer around here gets real busy, and so we're going to kind of back off a little bit and then gear up. I've got some great ideas. We're going to do some fun things in August. I've got some guests I want to try to get on, and some fun things in store. So just kind of a programming note. Great. I know we have actually a Kenneth, one of our buddies, had submitted a question. Before we get to his question, which again most often the show is completely unscripted. Creighton brings in a topic, drops it. It's my job to turn that into a Bible study. From time to time, you guys either send me a text message, which is 678-438-9202, or we get an email popecreighton@gmail.com. Obviously, I'm privy to those things. They come to me directly. And so that's not unscripted. I am somewhat aware of what the topic would be on those nights.
Still unscripted, just not a mystery.
Just not a mystery. Absolutely. But before we do, so I'm teaching currently. I'm building up to a verse-by-verse study through 1st and 2nd Peter. The series I've titled Peter, Life and Letters, because Peter's such a unique character in Scripture. Jesus, Paul, Peter, the three central characters in the New Testament. A lot of information given to us about Peter, and it's kind of important to know the man behind the message. And so probably 13 studies or so will establish this profile of Peter. We're about halfway through. I think this, not this Sunday, which is Mother's Day, but the following will be the 7th study. And so I'm starting to lay things out and putting things together and kind of thematically. And I've been kind of re-examining a real kind of radical story. I don't think it gets nearly as much attention. You talk about like the life, the ministry of Jesus, like top 10 things that come to your mind. Let me throw that out quickly. Like, what comes to your mind when you think of the life and ministry of Jesus? Isaac, first story, like just
Walking on the water.
Walking on the water. Justin.
Probably raising himself up from the dead.
Okay, resurrection.
Great one.
Crucifixion. Creighton, you got one?
Water to wine.
Water to wine. Feeding
Lazarus.
Lazarus feeding the 5,000, which was obviously more than that.
Or the 4,000.
Or the 4,000, which was another miracle altogether. Jesus is the Immaculate Conception. The wise men, the shepherds. You throw out like all kinds of stories, things that quickly come to mind. But what should jump almost to the top of the list? I mean, I want to say maybe, okay, so resurrection is one. I think we can all agree. No one's ever tried that one before. But like the other miracle or miraculous moment, and again, it doesn't get nearly as much press, but when you think about it, you're like, wait, what? That's the transfiguration. Like, so if you don't know the story, Jesus, Mount Hermon, up in the northern part, he's about to, from that point, he'll make his way back down to Jerusalem to die. This is like, he's 2-3 weeks out, maybe a month from the week of Passion. But he takes Peter, James, and John with him up kind of in a solitary place to pray. And so they're hanging out, they're doing their thing. And in the middle of this, Jesus, we're told, is transfigured. He, like the word is literally metamorphosis. Like what was inside comes out. Like, a caterpillar's always been a butterfly. In fact, like if you do, in Creighton, you probably remember some of these. I think a Radio Lab did a podcast about caterpillars and the butterfly, and how like if you do like crazy dissections of a caterpillar, you find the wing tissues, like everything about the butterfly is genetically built into the caterpillar.
I can believe it.
It just has to die to come to life. Like
After a fashion, yeah.
Yeah, it's the caterpillar is a really amazing. Like, just study the caterpillar and you'll believe in God, and you'll believe in resurrection. But Jesus metamorphosized. Like what was inside all along came forth. In fact, Peter, James, and John get to see Jesus as Jesus is. He just covered himself, cloaked himself in humanity, and they see him. And like it's just, and not only do they see Jesus, but Jesus is having this conversation with Moses and Elijah. Now it's, you're always kind of like, well, how do they know that it's Moses and Elijah? Because it's not like, there's photography. It's not like they had seen pictures. It's just the biblical evidence that there are name tags in heaven. Like that's how will we know each other in heaven? Well, it's because we have name tags. My name is, and there it is. That's how we'll know. So I've been studying the transfiguration again, but I've been doing it in light of Peter, because Peter's there and he sees Jesus like in glory, like in heavenly divine glory. He's radiating. And then Peter's like, someone's got to say something. And so Peter kind of opens mouth, inserts foot. It's like, hey, I think it would be good for us to like build 3 tabernacles, and just stay here forever. Forget about the rest of humanity. Let's just chill out here. This is too cool. And then God has to rebuke him, in the cloud. And, tells Peter basically, shut up and listen to my son. And then, boom, it's gone. He's normal again. The thought I had, which was interesting, and I was sharing this with the guys before tonight's episode, and Justin brought up something that we'll kind of segue into, which I think is also an interesting thought related to the transfiguration. Like, what was it like for Peter? Okay, so you see Jesus in glory, and then boom, it's gone. You're never going to see him the same way again.
Except when you get to heaven, right?
Well, that's an interesting thing. So Peter sees Jesus in glory, and then Jesus dies on the cross, and we're told that he's resurrected from the dead. And famously, Peter has interactions with Jesus post-resurrection. Famously, in Galilee, Jesus makes him breakfast. They have the Peter, do you love me interaction. Way before that, a couple weeks before that, Jesus appeared to all of the disciples, all of the apostles, minus Judas, minus Thomas. They're in the upper room. Jesus appears again. Thomas is now present. A week later, there's actually a reference that early, like day one, within the dynamic, there's Jesus appeared to the women, appeared to the disciples on the road to Emmaus, appeared to Cephas. Like Jesus had this appearance to Peter at some point, way before that, appeared to his half brother James. But that my thought is that when Jesus appears to Peter, is he in glory? Yes, he's in glory. He's in resurrected glory, bodily resurrected glory. But Jesus bore the scars. Like John, seeing Jesus in heaven in the book of Revelation, describes him as a lamb that had been led to the slaughter, that Jesus bore the physical scars of atonement. The scars in his hands, the scars in his feet.
I wonder if that actually means that maybe we'll have some of the scars that we have.
Who knows? And the Bible doesn't speak to that at all. The Bible does tell us that Jesus is the first of the resurrection of the dead. So all we know about resurrected glory is what we see within Jesus. But my point is that Peter is unique in the sense that Peter got to see Jesus in divine glory. And then he saw Jesus in diminished glory. I don't mean the full implications of that. He's in glory. But Peter will never see Jesus that way again. The way that Jesus presented himself on the Mount of Transfiguration, he will never be seen that way again. And Peter will have that point of reference. Peter understood in a unique way that only James and John, who were also present, and Moses and Elijah, Peter understood what Jesus really sacrificed to atone for our sin, to pay the price, to pay the penalty. So I've been saying, this is kind of an interesting thought. Not to get too far ahead of yourself, a little teaser for Sunday morning at Calvary 316. So Justin had a thought, and I'll just kind of throw it to you. I know we've kind of unpacked this thought and kind of maybe even moved beyond the thought. Share what you shared with me, and then I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that with a new thought.
So this is another podcast that I watch every now and then, and they're kind of going through this exact scenario of, Jesus being in glory, and then they kind of harken back to, like, when Moses was getting the 10 Commandments, and he was hidden behind the rock, he was interacting with God, and Elijah kind of interacting with God, and you made some good points after saying, but basically the whole thing is Jesus as God, and it kind of made the point of how did Moses know to look for the Messiah coming? Or Elijah look for these?
Let me lead you one step beyond where you're at. The theory is what are Peter, James, and John actually seeing?
Right. And so
And the theory was
right. They're seeing Moses and Elijah, and the theory being seeing Jesus in glory.
Outside of time and space.
He's out because he's outside of time and space at the time. So what they're looking at could possibly be Jesus interacting with Moses and Elijah during these key moments in their lifetimes at the same time.
Which is why they'd pick up on the conversation and be able to extrapolate, hey, this has to be Moses, this has to be Elijah.
Right, and then that's kind of the
it's like an Into the Spider-Verse type of a dynamic.
And that's kind of the conclusion that this other podcast came up with, which is really cool podcast. I think it's called like Ninjas or Butterflies or something. It's that T-shirt that I wear that says "Love Thy Karen" and stuff. It's that guy. Really cool.
So, I thought that was interesting. I kind of blew that up.
You did, but in a good way.
Yeah, I blew it up in a good way because it's like I don't think that that's possible, and there's two reasons. One, Moses and Elijah never cross paths. Like they live in completely different time periods. Like the way that the transfiguration is presented is that Jesus is not talking to Moses and now he's talking to Elijah. He's talking to Moses and Elijah. That the three of them are talking in a time and a space that is present. But and then they wanted to extrapolate. Well, this would have been in the past. They're overhearing the conversation, and that's impossible. Moses and Elijah never cross paths. Totally different time periods. They're both they personally never cross. Secondly, they're not really privy to Christophanies. In fact, the Bible is very clear. Moses did talk to God at the burning bush, but was not, and then Mount Sinai, receiving the law, was specifically not allowed to see God's face. Could see the train of his robe is what he was allowed to see, but that was it. Like, was not able to see the face of God. So that breaks down. And then there's no Christophanies ever mentioned in regards to Elijah. Elijah does hear the voice of God. It's in the still small voice. There's a famous story in regards to that. Elijah taken into glory with the chariot of fire. Very cool story. But there's no Christophanies. Now, like, if it had been Abraham, I might say, yeah, you know what? Like, they see Jesus as Melchizedek. Or, they're seeing Jesus as the commander of the Lord's army standing in front of Joshua, like actual Jesus standing, or they're portal to the angel of the Lord killing all the Assyrians. Those type of stories I could go with. Now, okay, will there ever be a time on earth where Moses and Elijah are buddies and are in the same time and space?
I am praying not.
I know you have your own Enoch thing, which I get. That's fine, and I'm not even like against that. But so in the Book of Revelation, yet future, we see that during the first 3.5 years of the Antichrist's reign, that God sends 2 prophets. He empowers these prophets. They're in Jerusalem. They're untouchable. In fact, one of them, if you try to attack them, will rain down fire from heaven. Very Elijah-esque. Water to blood. Very Moses-like. And they testify of Jesus. Like, they are representatives of Jesus in the midst of the Antichrist initial reign in Jerusalem, where the Jews have been deceived. Like, they're all in on the Antichrist, and you have these 2 witnesses in Jerusalem wreaking havoc, keeping the rain out. Very Elijah-esque. Like, performing these miracles. Like, bosses. Now, the world hates them. And at the 3.5 year mark, in conjunction with the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist is then granted power to kill these 2 witnesses. And their bodies lie in the streets. The whole world watches it, rejoices, exchanges gifts. The conscience of the world has been eliminated. And then after 3 days, they're resurrected and they ascend to heaven. Now, there's always this great debate. Who are the 2 witnesses in the book of Revelation? And hey, Enoch, again, according to Jude, he pre-flood was prophetic of the end times. Enoch's an interesting character.
I really want it to be Enoch because I need an end to that story.
Yeah.
It's the most upsetting passage in the Bible as far
You
as
never
I'm
read
concerned.
the Book of Enoch or
No, I
watched
sure
the newest
haven't,
Noah
Justin.
movie?
Okay, let's not even go there. But so the Bible says that anyone born in sin, it's appointed for man to die. Like that man has to die. There are, and this is the strongest argument for Enoch.
Mm-hmm.
There are two people in Scripture that we are given the indication that they don't die a physical death, and that is one, Elijah, unequivocally. He's taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot, and he takes his shawl, gives it to Elisha, and Elisha continues his ministry. And then Malachi says that before the coming of the Messiah would be what? Elijah would be sent. So one is absolutely Elijah. The only other person that seems to have the indication that didn't die is Enoch. We're told in the middle of a genealogy, Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. Like, he went on a day stroll with God, and God's like, hey, why don't you come back to my place? Which is like I think it's a strong argument. Now, almost universally, Moses is presented as being the other two witnesses. There's a lot of other reasons. The law, the prophets, transfiguration actually plays into this. And we don't really know what happened to Moses. Moses kind of just like walks into the sunset, and we're told that Satan actually tries to take his body. And the angels have a battle for the body of Moses. Why is the body of Moses important? Well, maybe God needs the body for a future reason. So my thought was, what if it's not Jesus and Moses and Elijah having a conversation in the past, but what if it's like, again, in the portal moment, Jesus talking to them about their ministry in the future? I think it's kind of a fun thought. Now, either way, it doesn't fully matter. It's just, again, you're privy to the earlier conversations that we had. And I don't really have a place to land this plane. It just was a fun thought that was thrown about.
Do they talk about, does Peter mention Peter, Paul, or John?
So Peter will write, I think it's in his first epistle, he writes that we beheld his glory.
Does he mention what Jesus, Moses, and Elijah were talking about?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they were privy to that info.
Man, I wanted, in the back of my head, I want to say that they were talking about what Jesus was about to go do.
Well, I feel like
but I don't know.
Implications during that story, or that Jesus tells them to hold back at a certain point. They can just see them, but they're not able to hear the conversation, kind of thing.
I don't. But again, they got enough of it to recognize that this is Moses and Elijah.
But we're not. Tags are for.
But they don't say what.
That's what the name tags are for.
That's what the name tags are for sure. So
yes. How, you're obviously studying Peter. Jesus did that for a reason, exposed that conversation for a reason. How did Peter or the other two, did they change?
So I think this makes even by his own writings, I think Peter could never shake that vision of Jesus out of his mind, especially after the resurrection, and when he sees that Jesus no longer looked like that, and Peter understood the great sacrifice that Jesus truly made. Now that's just a teaser. I'm not going to teach Sunday's Bible study here, but I think that all kind of ties into it. It's an interesting thought. Yes, you can come to Calvary 316, hear a decent Bible study, listen to wonderful worship, and we give away T-shirts. Creighton, you had a question. Kenneth had a question. Let's pivot here.
Yes. So we're gonna start. Everyone say hi to Miss Ann. She says, "Good evening, gents."
Hello,
she said,
Miss
"My
Ann."
dudes."
My dudes.
Good
We're not
evening,
even
my
gents.
dudes.
My dudes. Hey, she's been in here.
What?
She's been sitting. She sat
Yes,
right
she
in that chair.
has.
Yeah.
She was sitting right over there. We also have a howdy from Allie. A what's up from Justin. I don't know
I was responding
who
to
that
Ollie.
would be. Oh, is that what you were doing?
Yeah.
And my mom has an idea as to why Satan and the angels were wrestling over Moses' body.
Let's hear it.
And that is that the Jews would have idolized and worshiped Moses' body had they been able to have it after his death.
So I don't discount that, but they also did carry around the bones of Jacob
Yeah, that's true.
for like 40 years, to bring him back to a resting place. Like I don't like there's no evidence that the Jews were really big into body worship or death worship, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I agree.
like there's not,
but there's also
not a solid like precedent that would be. Again, why would Satan care about the body? Like, why would it's the idea that Satan, like that there's an angelic battle about the body of Moses for some reason. And it's interesting, but
I can't wait to find out exactly why it is. I think it's a very interesting, almost as interesting as Enoch. Almost.
Right, but we could go back.
Somehow, when I think when it gets to the point, you're not going to care about it.
You know what? That may be true. I'm not sure. I kind of hope that I still have those desires to
Dude,
learn.
how cool would it be to just chill out with Enoch?
It would be awesome. And I would be able to ask him about what he was doing.
I think it'd be cool to hang out with Enoch, though.
And Moses.
I just want to hear about the giants and the watchers and things like that. From his
What if Enoch's up in heaven and like he turns to Methuselah and he's like, bro, how cool would it be to hang out with Spice Daddy and Puff
Right.
Craig?
You know what? He's going to be the second guest on our podcast up there.
Methuselah or
Jesus?
Enoch?
Both of them at the same time.
I
Solid.
like that. So,
All
Creighton, topic.
So first, the topic is brought to you today by Get Fed Today. If you'd like a podcast that houses 5 Bible studies every week, we put that on. It's Get Fed Today. You can find it on Google, Spotify, or Apple Podcasting, as well as anybody that pulls their
The lineup
podcasts
this
from
week was
Apple.
superb.
It was Gail Irwin, Pancho Juarez. I love saying his name like that.
Pancho
Juarez. Sandy Adams, Chuck Smith, and my all-time favorite Bible teacher,
Zach
David
Adams.
Guzik.
Oh,
Zach Adams is a solid third.
dadgummit.
But yeah, so check it out. Get Fed Today, getfedtoday.com.
Hey, where'd you
Really
get the
great
Gail Irwin
podcast.
message?
Servant.org.
Oh, so you pulled it from his website?
Yes, that's where I get all of my stuff from.
Okay, I didn't know. So what's the website?
It's either servant.com or servant.org. And they've
If
got
only you had
a
the way
bunch
to
of
figure
stuff.
that out.
If only I did. It's on the podcast. I can look it up. Give me a second. Vamp for
Okay.
a second while I Google it.
No, Gail Irwin, if you've never listened to Gail Irwin is, I think he's actually in a nursing home now. He's close to meeting his maker. His wife, Ada, is already with Jesus. Gail ran an organization called Servant Quarters, and his whole thing was the Jesus style. Wrote a bunch of books, the Jesus style. Gail was, I think, one of the most engaging, dynamic Bible teachers I've ever had the privilege of meeting. Gail had the ability. He was kind of a heavier set guy. He wore suspenders. That was like his trademark.
Yep.
And he'd be abounding and yeah, like he had like this way. If you listen to Gail Irwin, you like all the things that you like about Zach Adams, you'll be like, Zach stole that from Gail.
I feel like I've met this guy.
Yeah, Gail Irwin is just a true saint. I've said that there's 3 guys that have contributed most to my teaching style, my theology, really. It's my dad. It was one of my Sunday school teachers, Dave Marini, who also gets featured on Get Fed Today.
And Joel Osteen.
And Joel Osteen. Benny Hinn. No, it's Gail Irwin. Gail Irwin. I was in an inductive Bible study class with him once. He was a guest lecturer, and he explained that anytime that he would go and speak, and he traveled all over the place. He probably spoke every Sunday at a different church across America. Just was constant. And but he would when anytime he got on stage, he would look for the youngest people in the audience, and that's who he would speak to. Because he's like, if I can keep the attention of the youngest people in this audience, then I'll have everybody else. And a lot of the times, because Gail was so funny, they would have the kids in. And so he would be teaching to the kids, and he would be animated, and he would move, and he would do this, and he'd do that. It was great. And Gail Irwin. So now, I'm glad that I'm glad they have Gail on Get Fed Today.
Yes, servant.org.
Yes. We got 20 minutes. What's the topic?
All right, so this is from Kenneth, and he wanted to know if we had ever done, it's Romans 13. I had it up on my phone, and now I've lost it because I'm foolish. I believe it's Romans 13. It is about authority. Yes, Romans 13. It's the first section, Romans 13, verses 1 through 7. And it is similar in scope to the idea of give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God's.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit more, it gets a little bit more into the grit of what that actually means. And on a personal level, there is a part in verse 3, I think, that actually made me think, I don't understand exactly how that's supposed to work. Because sometimes they absolutely are a terror.
Yeah,
and I'm just gonna give that. I'm gonna let you read it and then unpack it. Yes.
Yeah. Let's do that. So, and really, yeah. Let's read some of this and then kind of unpack it. Romans 13. Paul writes, and again for context, because we're coming at this cold turkey. Mm-hmm. Paul is writing to the Church of Rome. So he's writing to the church that is in the heart of the Roman Empire. The artery, like the main artery. This is the capital city, Rome. It is the seat of power. This church absolutely had a Jewish population to it. There was a lot of Jews that lived in Rome. But there were a lot of Gentiles as well. So it's a multi-ethnic, probably also multi-class. You had publicans, you had slaves in this church, you had owners, slaves, you had people in government, like what Washington, D.C., like almost everybody in or lives in Washington, like works in some context or in some proximity to the government. So like cities that are the seat of power, the people, so the people in this church are in power in some regard or in some support role, faculty, whatnot. Rome, I think at this point you probably have Nero, who was a madman. Rome was very corrupt. Again, Rome was never conquered. It self-destructed. Very similar to our society, things that we see happening today, with the exception of the absolute authority being Caesar. Or Caesar worship and how like the religious system was somewhat tied into it. It's different than our world. So Paul is writing to that church, right? And keep that in mind. He's not writing to Philippi. He's not writing to Corinth. He's not writing to the British. He's not writing to the fringe cities within the empire, Alexandria. He's writing to the church that's located in Washington, D.C., like the heart of it all. He says, let every soul be subject. That word subject is placed under. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God. And the authorities that exist are appointed by God. So in a passage that gets applied to government, Paul starts with a much broader idea. And that's the idea of submission. And the idea that authorities do not exist outside of the sovereign providential hand and thumb of God. That alone, forget about whatever else comes. Like that's hard. And forget about like government for a moment. Think about your boss. Like your boss might be terrible. And he might or she might be hostile, vindictive, mean, doesn't care about you. I mean, your boss could be rotten to the core. And like right at the beginning, God's like, yep, submit to that authority because all authority is given by God and is under God's sovereign hand. And you're like, so God has that authority in my life? That teacher's terrible. Doesn't prepare, is mean, has it out. Yeah, but that's God's teacher. Like all authority. My parents are terrible. Well, those are your God ordained. And like God is behind authority and can remove authority. Like God has no problems. Like there's nothing out of God's control. I mean, this goes back to like David. David is the anointed king of Israel. Like Samuel picks him out. you're going to be the king. That doesn't happen for years, decades. And who's still king? Saul. David knows he's the king, but Saul is still the king. And there's that story where, David's being hunted. Saul is trying to kill him. And they go back into the cave. They're in hiding. Saul goes in to relieve himself, and David, his men are like, "Hey, you can kill him. You'll be king. This is your moment." And David just cuts off the hem of his garment, and then feels terrible about it because he disrespected his king. And David's like, I know what God's plan is for my life, but you're still my king. And God will whack you when he wants to. And until God does, who am I to mess with the Lord's anointed? My job is to submit. And ultimately, the process of David submitting to Saul was the way in which God worked the Saul out of David. Which is why oftentimes God has us in situations that we have to submit to people that we struggle to submit to. But what's the point? God's trying to teach us something. He's trying to work on us and mold us and shape us and work things out of us. I had to work for my dad for 10 years. I say had to. I had the privilege of it. I chose to. But man, there were some real difficulties working for my dad. And why? Not because my dad there was anything wrong with my dad. It's that the things, there were things in me that were in him that grated on each other. And why did I need to submit to that? Well, because, and my dad will tell you, my dad wants me to be a better man than him. And those things in him that were in me, the process of submitting to him was the way in which God would work those things out of me. Submission it's a mission, submission. It is a mission. It's hard. But there's a point to it. God's in control of all authority. Now, in the application, also governmental authority. Therefore, verse 2, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinances of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you, be for good. But if you are evil, be afraid. For he who does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore, you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you will pay taxes. For they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render, therefore, to all their due. Taxes, to whom taxes are due. Customs, to whom customs. Fear, to whom fear. Honor, to whom honor. Now, I know that verse 7 is kind of where it ended. You got to read further. Because then Paul says, owe to no one anything except love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not commit murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. If all are summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And then at the end, he closes the chapter, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. Now, keep in mind that when Paul writes this, Paul will be beheaded by the government. Paul's going to die. Paul was persecuted by the government. He was persecuted by local government. The Jewish Sanhedrin wanted him dead. Paul was persecuted by towns and local municipalities. Paul goes into Philippi, liberates this girl of demon possession. They beat him. The civil authorities beat him and jail him. Then they find out he's a Roman citizen, and that becomes a problem. But everywhere Paul went, he was resisted by the authorities. But he submitted. Now, there is a concept of the hierarchy of moral law. If the government asks you to do or engage in something that violates the law of God, then you have to be obedient to the higher law.
What if they use your tax dollars to do something that clearly violates the law of God?
So that's a great question. Abortion. Let's throw abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, you know, we're told that our tax dollars don't go to the funding of abortion, but that's baloney, right? Obamacare, our tax dollars go to Obamacare, which funds abortion. That is such a difficult question, other than the fact that Jesus would say, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. So Jesus paid taxes. Paul very specifically says pay the taxes. And this was to Rome. So we would say, well, the murdering of babies, like, how can we support that? Well, the tax dollars of Rome was going to the murdering and the enslavement of all kinds of wickedness.
Yeah, they weren't used for nice things.
They weren't used for good things.
Well, they did bring roads and aqueducts.
There's a difference, and again, there's a difference between, listen, there have been people that have refused to pay income tax.
I've considered it myself.
Because out of protest for what their money is used for. And they make the argument like, hey, I am, like, my allegiance is to God and my conscience before God. And in good conscience, I can't pay taxes knowing that my tax dollars, some small percentage or whatever, is going to things that are in direct defiance of God. And if that's your position, you know what? Go for it. But don't resist what comes next. Because you're going to be arrested. Your wages will be garnered. You'll be probably thrown in jail. Like the law will come down on you hard. Now, hey, Paul would say, okay, you're obeying your conscience, submit to the authority. So just spend the rest of your life in jail. And you know what? And I would not have any type of a problem with your moral decision. Hey, you're being consistent. If you have that position before God and you feel that way. Now, I think the scriptures give a little bit. I don't think taxes are that black and white. Now, the participation of things like, for example, if they say that you're not allowed to preach the name of Jesus. Well, okay, I'm going to preach the name of Jesus, and I'll accept whatever consequences come. Because, again, we take a passage like this, and we like, well, what are they meaning? Well, look at the way that they lived. Paul was told not to preach the name of Jesus. He did. So he defied government. He was a conscientious objector.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to grasp here in the U.S. as American citizens because
we've had it good.
We've had it good, but I've been in a position where, you know, before I went to go do something, I physically looked around for the cops before I walked into the building because I would have been arrested and deported if they had caught me doing what I was doing.
So, you know, when we talk about government, I think the application, the challenging application to this text, let's go back to 2020 for a moment. And you can say, well, it was not a fair election. Donald Trump won, but it was the mail-in ballot scheme. Good grief, in Fulton County, they just found, over 200,000 duplicate. Like they duplicate ballots, and then they can't produce them. Like the whole thing. You can have like some questions. You can get banned for it, whatever. Not my point. My point is, no matter what happened, was it out of God's control?
Well, we have free will. That's the thing. It's like,
yes, but when it comes to authority, Paul's very clear that nothing happens outside of God's authority. Now, Paul's writing, by the way, where Nero is in charge.
And Paul's in jail at this point, yes?
I don't think he's in jail at this point.
No.
And he's probably writing this from Corinth, would be my guess. But God's in control of authority. Always. You go back to Israel. It's interesting that when you examine the period of the kings, Israel would have good kings and Israel would have wicked kings. And the wicked kings would bring about judgments from God. And God would always give the people the kings they deserved. So when the children of Israel were being wicked, he'd give them a wicked king. Now these are kingly appointments. It's not democratic voting. But God would give the children of Israel, his people, the king they deserved. And a lot of times it was for things to be miserable so that they would repent. And then what would God do? He'd raise up a Josiah or Hezekiah. A king that would bring about a national repentance. God's in total control. Nebuchadnezzar was God's anointed. That's crazy.
Yeah, I guess it just seems paradoxical because, what's the point of voting? Because there's the question, it's like, God's in control, but we also have free will.
For sure.
I think within the context of being a U.S. citizen, you have a responsibility to vote.
We're talking about divine things here, Justin.
Well, I know, but who's to say that God's not going to use that?
But this is where
responsibility for us as Americans, I think it's.
Yeah, but what Zach's saying though is what God ordains to happen is going to happen regardless of what you do.
So I have a dear friend. Someone that you know, that we all know, that absolutely 100% holds to that position. And as a result, doesn't vote. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. And you know what? If that is the position that you're taking, in true conscience, and that it's not, well, I just don't want to go through the hassle of going to vote because it's a headache, that's not the right reason. Not voting because it's a headache to go vote, and I don't want to go stand in line and blah, 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 blah. Well, shut up. That's nonsensical. But if it's like literally, I don't want to put my name behind either of the two candidates that I have. And I believe God's sovereign and he's in control. And that what will be. And my job is to pray for whoever becomes president and to submit myself under that, even if it leads to good times or bad times. If you want to take that position, I don't agree with that position, for the record, but I'm not going to argue against it. I'm not going to say that's wrong, because we do live in America. You do not have to vote. You have the freedom to not vote. It is not a forced obligation. Now, why do I vote? Because I do. And I've voted in every election, major election, that I'm able to. I don't vote in primaries because I'm not registered with either. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not registered with either. Now, Georgia's open, so you could go vote in whatever primaries you want to, and good conscience. I'm not part of their party, so I don't feel like I don't have a say. I don't feel like I should have a say. Whatever's left, though, I will go vote. I will go cast my vote. Why? Now, that doesn't mean that I pick one of the two options, because there's always a third category. I can write in anybody.
Zach Adams.
Or Sandy Adams.
I wrote in Chuck Norris one year.
Did you?
That would be a miracle.
But, so why vote? Well, I think that it comes back to this passage. And it's, render therefore to all their due. So I'm under authority, and the authority that I'm under asks for my say, and who's the leader. Now, I don't know if that plays forth or not, or if my vote matters or not, but I'm asked to participate. I'm not forced to participate, but I'm asked to. And as a Christian, David Guzik, I did an interview years ago when we were dealing with Trump before the 2016 election. We had an Outlaw Radio episode. I had David Guzik on. We talked about this very topic. And he brought up the stewardship element. He goes, well, I'm a citizen. I've been asked to participate. That means I pay taxes. Like, all I'm really asked to do is to pay taxes. I'm forced to do that. And I'm asked to vote. And I'm asked to register for a draft in case there's a war. And if I'm called, I'm being asked to go, and therefore I should go. Now, I love the movie Hacksaw Ridge. the Mel Gibson film, because it's a Seventh-day Adventist that goes to, it's Okinawa, it's Hacksaw Ridge, and he's a conscientious objector. He does not believe in killing. He believes that he's thou shalt not kill, and he will not carry a weapon. He's a pacifist, but he's called to be obedient, submit to authority. And so he goes, and he goes to get, they go to court martial him, and he's like, I will go. I'm just not going to carry a gun. I'm not going to fire a weapon. You're going to die. And he goes, well, if that's God's will, that's God's will. But I'm not refusing to go. I'm just letting you know that, like, I'm not going to take another life because I have to stand before God, and I believe that that's wrong. And he becomes a medic. It's a true story. He, I think, saves 50-something people on Hacksaw Ridge, going up, pulling them back, lowering them down the valley there. I think it's an amazing story.
Yeah, the same kind of thing with the story of Sergeant York from World War One. I don't know if you
I saw the old movie, but I'm not as familiar with the story.
Old movie with
you're working.
Chris Farley?
No, the pastor he just mentioned.
Dennis Quaid?
Joel Osteen?
No, the one where you asked
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart, yeah. I think who's in that movie.
No, I don't think Jimmy. No, he's not.
Pretty sure it's Jimmy Stewart. Sergeant York.
Not Sergeant
I'm
York.
pretty sure it is. But anyway.
Oh, I'm thinking The Dirty Dozen.
Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Jimmy Stewart is in it. But anyway, same kind of thing, and he ends up capturing like 130 something Germans on his own.
Yes, it is. No, it is Jimmy Stewart. I think.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I remember that.
So,
Back in my black and white days.
Right. That's one of my favorite movies of all times is Sergeant York. Little factoid there.
Gary Cooper.
Yeah. Okay.
Not Jimmy Stewart. The audience member just jumped in here and took care of it.
Yeah. My dad.
He was alive when the movie came out.
My dad is obviously watching. He sent me a text message that says sending it to Zach, asking a statement.
Okay. What? Yeah.
He said, "We swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to a person or a position. In the U.S., citizens have rights even greater than Roman rights." So
for sure.
So that begs the question of in America, like who is the leader? Is it the Constitution or is it the leaders who?
Well, it's the leaders that uphold the Constitution.
Right.
And the court system.
So when the Constitution and the leaders are at
odds, checks and balances. Well, there's a system in place that the Constitution established of checks and balances on authorities and government.
Right.
There are things right now that okay, here's a good example. Does the government have a power to force you to take a medicine? Hence what we went through with the pandemic and the vaccines. And I would say absolutely not. Now, people were being punished unconstitutionally for demonstrating what was a constitutional right to say my body, my choice. Like, you can't force me to take a medicine. And now a private company can say, well, if you're not going to do that, then we can fire you. But it was government edicts and mandates. Now, if you refuse the vaccine, you get fired for you were in the military, or you're working for the federal government. Well, it took time, but the Supreme Court has come back around and said, no, that's not. You can't do that. And, but here's the thing: anytime you take a stand, and I think that this is the big point, a good point to end on, because we are out of time, is where we can submit to authority. Submit to authority as Christians. Why? Because there's bigger things at play. Your death doesn't matter. Your death, if it proclaims Christ, and if you die by loving your neighbor, if you can go back, Fox's Book of Martyrs, Christians that are burned at the stake, whose testimony and those moments had reverberations that have lasted centuries. That's what your life's about. Death doesn't take anything from you. Paul writes this, he gets beheaded by this government. But that doesn't matter. Like, they can't take anything from you.
To live as Christ, to die as gain.
To live as Christ, to die as gain. To live as Christ is to get more of what I'm living for when I die.
Well,
and
I
that's
think when we're
Christ.
talking about authorities, it goes back to the fear of the one who can destroy your soul, not just the body.
Exactly. So submit to authority.
Well, actually,
And then when you don't need to submit to authority, when you need to stand up, that's fine. But then don't complain about the consequences. Mm-hmm. That's my point. Like, know they're coming. Be like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that whole story is not necessarily just submit to authority. It's do the right thing. That's the bottom line. I mean, Paul obviously didn't just submit to authority. He paid taxes, and then when it was time to speak out and do the right thing, that's exactly what he did. He wasn't afraid of the consequences. As Americans, what we commonly do is almost the easiest path. It's like, okay, they're telling me to get a vaccine. I'm just going to get a vaccine, or I need to do this, or whatever that is.
Well, I think on the opposite end, a lot of Christians in America get themselves worked up about stuff that just doesn't matter.
Right.
Like,
That's true.
Like the taxes, or what President Biden's doing, or President Trump's doing, or something like that. Just submit to God, submit to His authority, and do the right thing, like you said.
Yeah.
And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think though you have a responsibility as a U.S. citizen to speak out on when they're going against the things of God, but speak out against it and then move on.
I guess the question, the hard part is like, which hill do you die on?
Okay, that's
I mean?
a perfect segue because I'm going to say something that's going to be absolutely irritating to everyone watching and to you guys. Let's play it out. We got the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms so we can stand up against tyrannical government. Okay, I got you. And if they pass a law to take away my AR-15, absolutely over my dead body, are you taking away my AR-15? Okay. So when they show up at your door, are you going to shoot them in the face? Is that what Jesus would do?
That's what people say they would do, but they won't.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, if you play it out like, well, I get a Second Amendment. Okay, that's fine, that's great. But they just trampled over that, and now they're showing up at your house to take away your guns. Are you going to actually shoot someone in the face that's just trying to take away your gun?
I think,
or are you going to say, in the name of Jesus? Like, what are you going to do? Because if you're like, I'm going to shoot them in the face. Okay, that seems real Christ-like.
I think it's a misunderstanding of what the U.S. is. So, who does my allegiance lie to? Yes, it's the Constitution of the United States, but first and foremost,
it's God.
I'm a God. Second is the state of Georgia, because that's where I live. So, if the state of Georgia goes against it, I mean, you kind of go back to like the Civil War era, like of things. Like Robert E. Lee's a good example of this. Like
great example.
He was asked he was asked to lead the Union Army, and he said, "I can't because my state of Virginia is calling me up." Like it's
and he was not a slave guy at all.
He wasn't, and he went because his state called him up, and I think that's. People don't understand what the U.S. is.
It's a federal system.
Right. We're 50 different countries that fall under the same purview of one set of rules, basically.
But even then, if they show up and they're like, "Hey, we want your gun," are you shooting somebody in the face?
If my state of Georgia is against it, then yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that also breaks the law of God. So
over something that is materialistic.
If the state of Georgia has called me
so your higher authority is not God's law, but the state of Georgia. My
higher authority is, but God. How do you explain warfare in that instance? Because at that point, they're
coming to take a life. Listen, you have the right to self-defense,
right? And
but you have the right to just own a gun. Is that enshrined in God's law?
If he does say, if you don't have a sword, sell your and you have two coats, sell your cloak and buy a sword.
He doesn't say buy a sword. Find that in the scriptures and show me. He actually says, give away your cloak. If they ask for one cloak, give them the other.
No, he says if you don't have a sword, sell a cloak and get one.
You need to buy one of them fully automatic swords.
No.
I think that's the book of Enoch.
No, I'm pretty sure.
So listen, we're out of time. Hey, we loaded it up, man. Nothing like controversy at the end. I told you that's what we were gonna get.
Yes, I liked it.
And listen, I'm a Second Amendment. I own guns. Like it's like This is something that I've wrestled with. It's like, well, I've got that gun, Hey, now listen, if you're breaking into my house to harm my family, I'm shooting you in the head. And I'm gonna say that was God's sovereignty. You made a terrible decision and reaped the consequences. If you're gonna try to harm my family, I have no problems with self-defense, defending myself. But if you come to take my home and possessions and guns, you know what? Like, okay. I mean, I'm not gonna shoot somebody. And if you're like, you know what, you need to get out on the front curb, and we're gonna assassinate the rest of your family.
What if
we're gonna be praying for you in the process?
What if
of
the
it?
government comes to take your kid because you don't? Maybe I'm just hypothetical. It's hypothetical. Jessica wants to trans the kid, and you're like, no, but the government takes kids. What are you gonna do then?
Man, that's a great question. And in that situation, I'm probably going to jail for murder.
All right, fair enough.
But yeah, kids are a lot more.
There's a great
expensive
track
than guns.
record of God forgiving murderers in Scripture, and I think defending my child. Okay, Spice, you got your moment.
Luke 22:36. He said to them,
This is from the Message. You're reading some crazy translation.
This is ESV.
It's not even the Bible.
He said to them, but now let the one who has a money bag take it, and likewise a knapsack. And let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one.
Is that about the end times? Is that from the Olivet Discourse?
No.
Okay, that's a great tease. We're going to get into that passage next Wednesday night on the Outlaw Radio Show. Final thoughts, football mom. That's it. We're done. Yeah. All right, Spice. You just move along. He had his final thought. He pulled out his verse.
It goes
If you want to
further,
have
but
just a single message delivered to you without a bunch of people screaming about the Second Amendment, check out Get Fed Today, getfedtoday.com.
That was your final.
Yep.
All right. Hey, thanks for watching the show. Glad that you were with us. If you're watching, check out the podcast. Gets released. What you've been watching, the audio gets released as podcast. Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us. Outlawradio.org is our website. Quick links to everything. If you are listening, but you've never joined us live, 8 o'clock Wednesday nights, we go live. And so you can join the conversation in real time. We always enjoy that. So if you've been watching, thank you. If you're listening, check us out Wednesday nights at 8. Either way, may God bless you.